Hello, welcome to this conversation, Curating the Region. I'm really excited to be able to have a chat with Jenny O'Sullivan and Jesson. They are both early career curators and creatives in the East Midlands, doing fantastic things. And we thought this event was really important because I don't know about you, but we didn't really think there was much conversation going on about different roles in the arts, especially from kind of early career creative sides. So we were really keen to open that up and just start a dialogue with people that perhaps that have different roles in the arts and are doing things that are really interesting and really kind of are behind the scenes, I suppose, on the stuff that's going on in the East Midlands. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Amber first and then Jenny to kind of introduce themselves shortly, if that's okay.
Thank you, Ryan. That was really lovely. Hi, everyone. I'm Amber, and I'm a Midlands-based artist and an emerging curator. I graduated DMU this summer, so and then now I'm starting to work at Modern Painters New Decorators, which is an art gallery in Loughborough, and I'm their current curation and events assistant. So kind of putting on online events. I've been involved in numerous things across Leicester, like the DMU Fine Art Society. I ran like the DMU Fine Art auction and catalogue for last year's, and also did a few exhibitions within Leicester as well. So yeah, that's me. Jenny?
Yeah, I'm Jenny O'Sullivan, they, them, and I'm currently the curatorial trainee at the Attenborough Art Centre in Leicester, which is the art centre for Leicester University and also the biggest contemporary art space in Leicester. And so as part of that, I work there 3 days a week, and the rest of the time as part of the job, I'm on a postgraduate diploma course in socially engaged practice in museums and galleries, which has been very interesting. And I guess a lot of what I'm interested in is how to sort of put what I'm learning in this course into the sort of gallery practice. Like who gets to feel confident in gallery spaces, how can like gallery work come out of the gallery. And I guess I don't really have a creative practice, but I sort of do a lot of creative things, sort of like hard creative activities that are all very different. So I'm a drag king, like a singer-songwriting drag king. I used to do a lot of playwriting, and I'm more into drawing sort of comics now, and post-pandemic I'm really hoping to get more into printmaking.
Fantastic. It was lovely to hear about what you're both up to. For the rest of this kind of conversation, I thought it'd be great if we could have maybe 30 minutes in dialogue, and then towards the last 10 minutes of the session, open up the floor to questions from anyone else who'd like to kind of pitch in. I thought it'd be really nice to start with the question, what was your route into the arts? So Amber, I'm wondering, where did you kind of what's the process? How did you get to where you are now?
So for me, I came through the education system, so kind of like A-levels, foundation, and then on to university. And while I was at DMU, I did quite a lot of volunteering. Like I said before, like I helped set up the DMU Fine Art Society in my second year. And I noticed that there was quite a lack of events and sort of creative networks for students at DMU, especially mixing between the years and mixing between different courses. And it felt like there was quite an isolation between like fine art and other subjects. So setting that up kind of what really started my route into the arts, because during that time I really noticed what we got out of the groups that we had, and there were so many amazing creative people that came along, and not just from art courses but also from like science, IT, and it was really interesting to get so many different backgrounds, and that kind of was what spurred me on to wanting to push my route into the arts further. So from then I went on to curate the second year fine art exhibition, and also just got involved in more networking opportunities, and that kind of led me down this path, which I ended up now, as I said before, like as the Curation and Events Assistant and Modern Painters New Decorators this year, interning. And I think, yeah, just getting involved with so many different projects throughout my time at DMU is really what made me fall in love with curating. So it was quite funny because when I first heard of curating back in like A levels, I thought, oh, that sounds really boring. Like, why would I want to do that? And sort of as I got older and as I went through these experiences and seeing the kind of like responses that we got, it made me just fall in love with it and want to carry on and push my practice even further. So yeah.
Thank you, Amber. And how about you, Jenny? What was your route into the arts, and what do you think about curating when you first heard about it or first ended up going down that path?
Yeah, I guess I also sort of came through like university, but I studied German and Spanish at the University of Cambridge, which I chose to do because like there was just so many different things you could do. Like you could do like sort of history and politics and art history and film studies as long as it was like in German or Spanish. So I kind of liked the variety of that. And also as part of that, you had to do a year abroad. So I guess like thanks to the Erasmus scheme, I went to work in Germany and did like sort of 3 internships and volunteer positions. And the first one was at a small contemporary art gallery in Freiburg for a few months. Then I did some like community orchestra administration, and then finally, slightly randomly, went to work as a wildlife tour guide on the coast, which was great. And yeah, so then I graduated. I went back to Huddersfield, where I'm from, like whilst applying for jobs, like just looking for anything sort of creative. And whilst I was in Huddersfield, I sort of did a bit like local events production, and that I decided to set up a queer open mic in Huddersfield just because there wasn't anything like that, and I was really missing it from like university, and that was really valuable. And me and my friend ran that twice before I got this job, which was part of what the university sort of called like a diversity diploma scheme. So you could only like apply if you were from certain like characteristics or backgrounds. So I was like eligible based on economic background and sort of retrospectively also being artistic. So yeah, and now I am here.
That's fantastic to hear about how you've both been collaborating with so many different projects and so many different organizations. And that kind of leads me on to the next question that I've written down, which is I wanted to ask you about what you've kind of been up to recently, what's been going on. And I wonder if you could tell us about a recent project that you've been involved in and what you've learned from it. Amber, what's been cracking at Modern Painters New Decorators?
So we've kind of been shifting all of our practices onto the online. Obviously, we all know that at the minute we can't really see each other and be in the physical. So we've kind of had this process of moving everything online and creating events online that are just as engaging as if you were visiting the galleries in person. And I think this has been quite an interesting kind of time for us to adjust our way of thinking towards what it really means to be in a gallery space and what it means to actually connect with people. Because some of the conversations that I suppose I've had over the last few months have probably been more engaged over Zoom than they probably would have been in person. So it's been really interesting. And at Modern Painters New Decorators, we kind of wanted to create a conversation and a discussion that was quite relatable to everybody at the moment. So we came up with Grapefruit, which was an online event program, which kind of overcoming creative blocks, which I'm sure every creative person at some point in the last year has experienced due to whatever it's been. And that was a really interesting event. And I think, fingers crossed, people got quite a lot out of it. We had you guys take part, and so Jesson as well, who is also here. So that was a really great project to get involved in. And then another thing which I've been collaborating with No Job in the Arts on is issue number 5, which isn't released yet, and it's kind of in the making. So I guess this is like a little teaser for it. But the project kind of was introducing artists from around Leicestershire. And I kind of went into the project not necessarily knowing what to expect or what we would get out of it, only that it would be based on artists in Leicestershire. And although I've obviously already worked with the wonderful community in Leicester City, it was really amazing to actually explore the rural areas and discover artists that, you know, may have faced geographical barriers beforehand and probably aren't as well known because they're not in Leicester City and instead they're on the outskirts. And also, like, seeing the responses that we got from the artists, it was quite an emotional project, and I think there was a lot of honesty that came from it, and I recognise that a lot of artists have been experiencing the same feelings and emotions that I have during the pandemic, and it was such a beautiful project to work on, and really like made me learn a lot about myself and about what I wanted to get out of the projects that I work on, and I hope that I can give back to other artists as well. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
And how about yourself, Jenny? Has it been similar in terms of this shift to digital working, and have you been using the new digital tools in a way of connecting with artists, for example?
Yeah, like I think it was about 2 weeks after I started this job when the sort of first lockdown happened. So it's basically been like exclusively online. And yeah, I guess the project I really like to talk about is one that isn't quite happened yet. So I'll just mention it very briefly. But yeah, at the end of March, I'm running a postcard project for trans day visibility, which is, yeah, like with a postcard project, really thinking about how art can sort of come into people's homes, like despite, yeah, the sort of isolated circumstances. But yes, I'll say keep an eye out for that one. But one of the first projects I worked on was issue 4, No Jobs in the Arts. Like, yeah, back in the summer, which Amber Arts had commissioned No Jobs in the Arts to produce a zine for showcasing emerging disabled artists in the East Midlands. And I think that just what I'd said from that would be like, it's really like the value of like an open call, like especially as someone moving to a place where I actually don't know any artists, or I didn't know any artists at the time. Just sort of asking quite openly like who is here, and being able to offer them something, because that was like a theme that sort of really, and we made like a digital version of that zine as well, and this sort of reminds me of slightly afterwards, Amber Arts and I were working on a series of commissions for disability arts online, and that's quite a lot of submissions, but we weren't able to give like 5 people the commission. But I found it really interesting sort of going through the submissions and we were like really trying to think of a way that what can we give these people that isn't just like a sorry, no, it wasn't you this time. So like Disability Arts Online, we're like offering people some like mentoring, and because Amber Arts is like a creative learning department, we're like, some people just want to get better at like landscape drawings. We're like, oh well, we have a cost for that. Do you want to go on it for free? Or other people, it was like, we know artists who we think really like connect to your work, and obviously we couldn't do it for everyone just because of like capacity, but I think just really tried to find, I don't know, ways of connecting with artists that are just a bit like less than exclusion, less than just being like, no, sorry, it's not you, because that's the bit I hate most, just like especially when you get unsolicited submissions and just, I don't know, just sending a blanket, sorry, we can't program at the moment email just feels like wrong somehow.
It sounds like you've both been doing some kind of amazing during the pandemic, and I think that leads on to the next question beautifully. Why do you think it's important for galleries and arts institutions and emerging creators like yours to collaborate with other young and emerging creatives? Please, whoever would like to go first.
I'll go first. Ryan, you sounded just a tiny little bit like a robot then. I think your Wi-Fi was a little bit low, but I still managed to hear you all right. Yeah, I think like it's important for galleries and institutions to collaborate with emerging artists, is because like we are, I suppose, the next generation that is going to come up, and we come from a different perspective, have a different voice, and I think especially right now there's like a lot of social and political issues that are currently being raised, and even like which have been heightened even more so because of the pandemic. and emerging curators and creatives are in the centre of that. And I think it's really important for galleries and institutions to kind of grab a hold of their voices and make sure that they're heard as well as established, because, you know, in the future, these people are going to come up next. And I think it's really important that there is this sense of collaboration between all of these people, because we want everyone's voices to be heard, and kind of like what Jenny was saying about not just saying no and actually providing some sort of aftercare. I think that's really, really important in terms of helping those artists develop and grow, rather than just kind of being like, no, sorry. It's like, okay, why was it a no this time, and where can we go in the future to help you get to where you need to be? I think that is really important. So yeah.
And how about yourself, Jenny? Why do you think it's important for galleries and arts institutions to collaborate with young and emerging kind of creatives?
Yeah, I think I mainly agree with Amber. Like, I think despite like anyone's best interest, like the longer you work in sort of any sort of sector or job, I feel like the more likely we are to just sort of get used to the way that things work and the way that things are. So right at the start of it, like I was saying, like feeling uncomfortable with sending blanket like rejection emails to people, like that would probably just be something that if you carry on, you're like, oh, it's just part of the job. But I think right at the start of it, you're much more like receptive to everything that might not be how it should be, or like, I don't know, all these sort of like tensions and things that are uncomfortable. And I don't know, I guess being earlier on in your career, more willing to like try and do something about it. And I guess, yeah, like I sort of said, I guess young curators are more likely to know young artists and young creatives, and I think no sort of sector is sustainable without embedding young people in it. Yeah.
I agree completely that there has to be somebody who is making space for the next generation, really, and making sure that voices are being heard, and someone who's there kind of carving space and kind of stepping aside and letting someone kind of come in place. I suppose just kind of going off that, as you're kind of right at the start of your careers, I wonder if either of you has any kind of particular focus or motivation. Have you found that perhaps that area or that barrier or that aspect of your practice that you would like to help kind of encourage voices from maybe a certain background, or maybe a certain theme that you're interested in? Jenny, I know you mentioned at the start accessibility.
Yeah, I guess it's like, I mean, it does come up a lot, because like the Edinburgh Arts Centre, like whilst it's not like disability led, it does have like a really, like one of its primary focuses is on accessibility and inclusion, and they have like a sort of huge like learning team with a focus on different kind of access needs and like non-verbal visitors and things. So I think that, yeah, I guess that is really interesting to me, but I guess just because it's so much part of the everyday job, it doesn't feel like a specific interest, which I guess is the way it sort of should be. Like ideally it would just be like, yeah, accessibility is just part of everything that we do. But I guess at the same time it just needs specific energy put into it, because at the time so many things just aren't accessible. So yeah, but yes, that is an interest to me. Yeah, I can't think of anything else at the moment.
No problem. And how about yourself, Amber? I know in the past we've perhaps talked about people bringing people together, and that power of a project as a vehicle to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you know, there should be, I'm quite interested in the theme of like community building and this idea of like bringing people together who aren't necessarily you know, been brought up in the creative sector. Like I've been quite lucky to have kind of come through this route of university and education, but there are creative people out there who might not have, and I think it's really important that we also include them in our artistic community as well, because they have as much of a voice that needs to be heard as anyone else. And I think I'm quite passionate at the moment about this idea of emerging artists, maybe because I've kind of noticed the institutional barriers that I faced while I was at university, and there was this kind of lack of support for students, especially when graduating, you know, and during a pandemic, that's definitely made it even harder. So right now, my kind of focus is on supporting those sort of emerging artists who have faced these barriers and have faced these difficulties, and kind of finding ways that we can help them make that next step. Because once university's finished, or once education's finished, and once you've decided to make that jump, it can be really difficult to put your feet down. And I don't think there is enough out there at the minute to help those. So yeah. Definitely
100%, especially in the climate that we're in at the moment, where the kind of ground has changed beneath our feet, so to speak, and we're more than ever heading into the unknown. That support network really does need to be as strong as it possibly can be. In terms of the next question that I've got written down here, I was really interested to explore how you both negotiate all of these different creative roles you have in your kind of life. Jenny, I know at the start of this conversation you introduced yourself as not only a kind of curator, but also a drag king. So I'm really interested to know, like how do you manage all of these different creative things that you have going on in your life?
I think the answer is sort of hectically, but yeah, no, I don't know. I guess I always just feel weird, like when I say I do so many like little bits of random different things. But I mean, being a drag queen is definitely a huge part of it. Like I've managed to luckily keep some of that up during the pandemic with like online drag shows that my friends have been running and things. But I do really feel that having lots of different like sort of creative like inputs, they really do inform each other, and all of that definitely informs the work I would do as a curator. Like, for example, I guess sort of actually relating to what you were saying before about have now thought about it more, focusing on accessibility, is that I'd be really interested to have like more responses from other art forms to the artworks in the gallery, which I think really could be like an accessibility thing as well. Like, because even though you can have like an audio description of a painting that like, and it's really useful and necessary, but it's not like the same artistic experience as like, I don't know, the experience you'd have looking at a painting, whereas maybe you could like commission a poet or a musician to like make something in response to that, and then you would have the description of what the painting looks like, but also like an artistic experience to go along with it. And that not even just for like disabled people, or like for anyone. I think that would be a really just another way of like being able to enter or engage with the artwork, because I think it's definitely something that does need supporting, because art galleries can be really like alienated and uncomfortable spaces, because like that's sort of how they were designed. But yeah, so no, it definitely informs on that, and hopefully post-pandemic the gallery lights will be back on, and maybe you'll see my drag king character down at Edinburgh Arts Centre running a queer open mic. So that'll be the dream.
It sounds like that negotiation between different roles in your practice expands to also putting yourself into the shoes of the viewer. That sounds like it's a really important thing in terms of accessibility, being able to relate to a viewer with different access needs. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I think definitely, and I think a lot of that definitely does come from needing to like employ more disabled people in the arts, so that's just like an embedded part of it. Because like, you know, like when I was speaking this in, I can only imagine what it's like to be a blind person and not be able to access opinions. So really, like if that wasn't an idea we'd put forward, that would definitely be something you'd have to consult with like actually like blind and like visually impaired people. So yeah, I don't know, I guess so much of socially engaged practice is just about make this about the viewer. Like it's not about you as a curator just being like, here's what I want to do. It's like how is this for everyone? Especially when like galleries are publicly funded, it's like this has to be for everyone. So how are you making it for everyone?
Thank you very much. To go back to this question of how do you negotiate between your different creative roles, I wanted to come across to you again, Amber, and kind of particularly ask, how is it that you manage this role as both being a curator and leading projects to also being an independent kind of creative practitioner and your work as a kind of artist and photographer?
Yeah, so I think I feel like they have become quite interchangeable, and I haven't really like identified a label yet as to specify what my role is as a whole. you know, I feel like it's just like, this is me and this is what I do and this is kind of my experience. I don't really feel like I switch out of my work mode too much, because the reason I went down this path is because it obviously is just who I am naturally, and I kind of enjoy this way of working. So if I do come across an artist that I think somebody I know will be inspired by, I will just send it to them and have like a really good chat about it, even if it's like a weekend or whatever. But I think what's quite important to say in terms of negotiating is that, like, they kind of, when one sort of stops, the other one kind of brings me up. It's a kind of like a bit of a weighing scales, really. And I just see them as like where they fit in. So I think if anyone's sort of thinking at the minute, like, how can I be a curator and an artist and do a part-time job and whatever all at the same time, it's really important, I suppose, not to put yourself down and think why I should be doing my artwork right now, but I'm not, because I'm focusing too much on this kind of curation project that I'm doing. And I think just see it as, this is your practice as a whole, and just appreciate the process and the time that, you know, it takes, because that's kind of what I'm doing. And I am struggling a little bit with my time negotiation, but I'm trying to see this as like, this is my creative practice, and yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that will resonate with lots of people in this chat, that idea of having to have multiple different hats and the boundaries between them being fluid and not kind of demarcating. I'm at work now, I can't be creative. I wonder, how do you how did you get to this space? Was it through a lot of kind of trial and error? Is this a recent thing that you've been able to kind of dissolve the boundaries between them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was quite a recent thing, because I think when I went to university, there is definitely this kind of pressure that you have a project and you have a deadline and you need to finish it. And any sort of projects that you kind of do in between is, I suppose, seen as extracurricular. So it's not necessarily considered as your main art practice, when really they all come into each other. And I think that's probably an institution's problem that they've kind of put into artists and students. So sort of taking myself out of an institutional mindset and putting myself into this new way of working, that's where I've really found that balancing my time is actually not seeing it as like, okay, this is my art practice, this is my curation, but instead putting them together and being like, they both fit, because as a curator, that inspires me because I look at other people's work and become inspired. As an artist, I'm trying to think about the way people will engage with my work, and in you know, and then looking at it as a curator's point of view, it's kind of like, great, how can people engage with another artist's work? And it's kind of this back and forth, constant conversation with myself. I'm just trying to be like, don't put myself down if I don't spend 20 hours in the studio creating a piece of work, because honestly, since the pandemic started in March and since I lost my studio space, I have not done one piece of work as an artist as of yet. And only this week am I getting a studio and I'm going to start creating again, because my motivation for that was massively down and I felt really deflated. And it's only now that I'm actually starting to appreciate that my practice as a curator is part of my practice, and not to be like, okay, I didn't make a painting, but that doesn't mean that I'm not an artist, because it does. It all feeds into each other. So yeah.
Definitely, that idea of you don't have to create something to be creative, I think is a really important barrier to address. That to be an artist, you don't have to make something physical, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but a conversation can be a creative output. That is fine. That's to do something that is something that's useful to us all, like this conversation right now. To kind of go back to this idea of negotiating different creative roles, I wanted to pass over to Jenny and have a conversation about a recent piece that you did. I believe it was for the Tim Neath exhibition. that you kind of managed to blend your roles as not only as a curator but also as a musician, and that kind of that dialogue that Amber was talking about kind of having a relationship with the artist. And I wondered if you'd be willing to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that was for the Kelly Richardson exhibition.
I apologise.
That's fine. I was just thinking, I don't think I did any music to me. But yeah, so that was Kelly Richardson's Marina 9, which was like a huge video installation in our main gallery. Like, so that's how I imagined like a future Martian landscape where sort of droids had like crashed on it and were like decomposing, or yeah, whatever droids do in the future. And because our galleries were just basically shut for almost the entirety of that exhibition, even though it was such like a phenomenal thing to look at, because I played the cello, and actually the university was like doing a sort of music scholarship scheme where you could get lessons as well. So I was like working there and doing the music things, and then I was like, actually, you know, I reckon I could make a version of Life on Mars on the cello. So, and because we were, as staff, were still allowed into the building for a while, yeah, me and the marketing guy who was really good at video editing, we made a little music video in the artwork, and I played, yeah, like David Bowie's Life on Mars, which was just like sort of for fun. Like, it was just like a nice thing to be able to share with people, to sort of show the exhibition, and yeah, sadly no one could see it in real life. And
how did that feel as a curator? Because I suppose that's a really interesting blended space between roles, where you're kind of directly having this kind of shared experience of being able to work with the artist. So I'm just curious, how did that feel to be invited into that creative space?
Yeah, I guess it did feel like, so I guess it was weird because it was just like an idea I had, and then I was like, oh, can I do that as a curator? But like, he wasn't actually in a space that I'd been curating. I was just like, that looks cool, and I can do a cool thing, and no one else is allowed in the building. But yeah, no, it was, they did like sort of blend really well, because it was just such like an atmospheric piece, and obviously, yeah, getting to play in an empty art gallery is a bit of a dream as well, because it's like so huge and resonant. So yeah, I thought it was mostly just for fun, but it was cool to, I guess it was another example of thinking about how you can like blend different like art forms. So maybe that could be something to build on in the future. I'm sure they'll get me to do some cello playing at Perkins for a musician.
Oh, that's fantastic. Love it. I've got another question written down here, which I'd kind of like to give you both the floor. I suppose if I was sat watching this, I'd kind of, as an emerging artist, I would have never have even considered that there's a possibility of me being kind of like a curator. That sounds like such an abstract concept as a job. And I had the same years and years ago with the idea of being an artist, like such an abstract, who can be an artist? Is that thing? So I wanted to ask if you had any advice or perhaps reflections that you'd like to share with the creatives about either being a curator or any of the projects that you've been able to deliver, or you kind of exampled in this conversation. So Amber, if you're right to kick us off, do you have any kind of, any seeds of wisdom?
I think kind of going back off the last question, is to kind of just keep going and to kind of be kind to yourself and understand when you need that time to take a break and focus on a certain part of your practice, and don't feel deflated that you are doing one thing. If something doesn't feel right for you, trust your gut and kind of go in that way. I think for people who are kind of looking for a route into the arts and kind of this route into curation or becoming an artist, I can't stress enough how important it is to be going to different exhibitions and different events. And everyone's here today, so they're obviously doing it, which is a fantastic thing. But just keep going and make those conversations and have those really interesting discussions with people. Get to know other people's practices and what they're up to, and that in turn might actually help you in the future. For example, when I did the second year fine art exhibition, I actually met G there, and that was our first conversation, and that's led to a really beautiful kind of friendship, and we've really influenced each other in our projects in the future. And that was all from just keep going to these exhibitions and kind of getting to know people. So yeah, just keep going, believe in yourself. Don't be too hard if you don't feel like making a piece of work or doing a certain project. I mean, if you've got deadlines, maybe don't take that advice, but just in general, like, just be kind to yourself and just take every day as it comes, really.
It's lovely to hear about that kind of establishing of a support network, not only in terms of other people, but also kind of a support network for yourself, and almost not being too hard on yourself. I think that's really, really good advice for early career creatives to take into kind of account. I'd also like to ask exactly the same question to you, Jenny, if that's okay, and that idea of, do you have any tips, or is there any kind of reflections that you'd like to share on the projects that you've been involved with so far?
Yeah, I think just like, I guess picking up on this question, but also referring back, I realised I never actually answered the question about what I first thought of curating, which I think is very linked to this, because like, I definitely don't think I'd ever heard of curating until about 3 years ago when I was working at the gallery in Germany. So it took me to get a job in an art gallery before I'd heard of what curating even was. And at the time, I thought it was like, maybe it's a German word, but so I just think. It's funny as well, because like, really luckily for me, my mum's actually really interested in art. So we always used to go to art galleries, like we used to go to the sculpture park quite a lot. And I'm not sure if this is just like, I don't think it is just me being poor extrapolating from sets of information, but it never even crossed my mind that it would be anyone's job to like choose what goes in there, or that any jobs are involved. Like, I know when I mentioned to my family, like next time the public got this job, they were like, oh, so you're gonna like stand in the art gallery and make sure no one touches anything, because that's like the first job, that's the only job people see in an art gallery, is like the invigilators. So I really think, I don't know, I just sort of wish that there was people like at school, someone would be able to come in and be like, this is what curating is, this is what a dramaturg is. They have assistant dramaturgs and assistant curators, and all of these institutions have teams of marketing people and teams of educational people and teams of technicians, and all of these are jobs that you could do, instead of just being like, oh, arts, it's hard to get into, like, because there are so many jobs. Like, I mean, there's not enough jobs, but there still are some that I never even knew existed until I started scrolling arts jobs after I graduated. But yeah, I guess in terms of tips, like, yeah, I guess it's really difficult because it always just depends how much like time you have available. But yeah, I think just sort of find an experience wherever you can, even if there's like a bit of like volunteering, or like some galleries and stuff even do like digital volunteering things at the moment, but it's not great that you have to get in via volunteering, but and if that like isn't really an option, I think you can also make your own experience. Like, I guess I'm referring more to like when I set up the open mic in Huddersfield, I think it's just so much about you can feel what's missing in places, or like, I guess every time you just come across something and it's like a tension, or it's like, why is that being done like that? Or like, surely that would be better if it was done like this, or like, why don't we have that here? Like, I think just hold on to it, because that's really important, and see what you can do with it. Like whether it is like making an event, or like a one-off online event, or a zine, or like, I think anything you can make is definitely something that you can talk about in an interview or write on your CV. Like any initiative that you've taken, like, it doesn't have to be huge and it doesn't have to go anywhere. It could just be like just a response to something. And I'd also recommend keeping up with like the sort of, I guess, debates and hot topics in like museums and galleries. Like, I think there's the Museums Journal, that might be one you have to pay for, but they have like a website as well with lots of articles on about like, yeah, all the big issues in museums and galleries. So I think that would be what I would say.
Fantastic. I really like that idea of, it may be cheesy me saying it, but the idea of you can be the change. That if you find something, and you should just do it and have a go at it, and in some cases it might not work, but at least you gave it a go and you had a chance to try and do something different. And it's exactly the same as what kind of working with Charlie we've been trying to do, is just having a go at it, and some of the things that we do absolutely fall on their face, and other things that go really, really well, like being able to have this fantastic conversation with you two. In this kind of last almost 15 minutes, while we both have you here, I wanted to open this conversation up to the rest of the people that are in this audience. and perhaps open for contributions, for questions, or to engage in a dialogue. So if anyone has any questions or any ideas or any feelings or anything, please feel free to stick them in the chat. I've been kind of reading them as we go along, and we can return to these. If anyone has anything that they kind of want to contribute but don't feel kind of able to say it, I'm happy to read it out in the chat. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, now would be a fantastic time to say them.
I'll give you my usual 5 seconds. Probably a very detailed, layered question. It's probably for a bigger discussion, long discussion. Hey Jenny, by the way, and Amber. Amber's hi to already, I think. Because you both joined, the slight problem is that you both entered curatorial practice not wanted to be curators to begin with. So, you know, you could be trained as a curator and therefore end up in a creative job. You kind of both accidentally almost found yourself to discovering curatorship. But now that you're there, we lived in a world once upon a time where there was this very specific thing that art happened in certain ways, obviously very difficult, fluid and adaptable and possible, but there was a very set kind of practice. We're now in this place where everything's to play for, everything's being figured out. My question is more, how are you potentially able to be the mediator of the very idea of curatorship going forwards into the future? So curatorship being the practice of mediation between, you know, the standard being artist and institution, and this person in the middle is the curator that kind of is the glue or the fluid, the conduit to enable those relationships to happen. So how can you shape curatorial practice in a world where all practices are being shaped at the moment, or reshaped and reconsidered? Of course, you know, being open to ideas and adapting your practice and being responsive is clearly the baseline. That's all that we absolutely do. Yeah, I just wondered what your thoughts, and maybe even Ryan and Charlie could contribute, or anybody else. How do we shape curatorial practice itself to not have to be able to reject artists because of deadlines and booking schedules and things like that? Don't know if that's too vague or too big a question for another discussion.
Got a sort of vague answer. Like, I guess there's a lot of things I have a lot of thoughts about as well. Like, I don't think I have any answers at the moment, but like, I guess it came slightly from reading the Care Manifesto, which I think just came out a bit ago, which is more about sort of activism and care work and things. But I always thought, like, what would a gallery look like if it was a cooperative? And yeah, I don't know. I guess that's what I would wonder. Or maybe like we could like facilitate some sort of conversation sometime about like what would art galleries look like if they weren't run like this? Like if we designed art galleries again from scratch without carrying on like all lots of traditions and like the sort of management structures, like, I don't know, just imagine like if it was an artist-led cooperative, and then, I don't know, maybe artists would like get involved in the running of it, and then, I don't know, through that, just, I don't know, be able to like maximize the amount of sort of opportunities and support that is available to each other. I don't know, some sort of horizontalism, but that's just one idea.
No, totally agree. It might be something for No Jobs. It'd be really nice to maybe set up an event where we have new and old, if you like, curators, considering the whole idea of curatorship going forwards.
I think, Amber, you've unmuted yourself. Would you like to respond to that question?
I was kind of responding to what Jenny kind of said in terms of artist-led kind of organisations and galleries, because obviously MPND is kind of this artist-led gallery, and all of our, you know, members and stuff are artists. And I found that working at MPND has definitely changed my opinion of how we approach projects, because we're not kind of just thinking about this. It's kind of a bit like what you were saying this morning in that conversation with Elizabeth about this kind of promotion of artists, and it's more about questioning how we can push their development and how we can push their careers forward. And it's not just about, okay, what can we do for them? And there is definitely this interesting community involvement that happens there, where it's about pushing yourself and pushing other artists forward in a future idea, and not just about, okay, this is a gallery, this is an exhibition, and that's it. And it's more about what can we do to shape everything. And I think, yeah, Jenny, you are absolutely correct that artist-led organisations and communities can really help that. And it would be really great to, like G said, have a conversation where all curators sit down and kind of have this big discussion about what is the future of curating and where can we shape it.
There's a lovely, sorry, Brian, spot in. There was a lovely point that you made, Ryan, I think in a previous conversation, might have been today as well, where the artist as audience is considered. So the danger that I always feel about artist-led context, I totally agree with artist-led context for certain things. It'd be like a library led by writers. So, you know, the writer-led library. So we're always kind of talking to ourselves sort of thing, but artists as audiences being the context and the bridge between things. Sorry, I'll shut up now forever.
No problem. They're wonderful thoughts, and yeah, I'm sure we could talk about it for hours, but definitely I think there's another conversation, as G, Amber and Jenny kind of suggested, that No Jobs could perhaps be a kind of a place for a dialogue that we'll definitely consider. I see there's quite a few other questions coming into the chat, so it's okay if we could kind of have a go at some of these. The first one's from Capture and is essentially asking about networks and kind of creating networks and how you kind of plug into them. I suppose, did you have any tips on how you kind of got plugged into the networks that you use, and are there any digital ones that you recommend?
Yeah, so obviously when it wasn't a digital world, like I said before, I would just go to exhibitions and events, and that's kind of where my networking really started, because I would just be having conversations with people and faces that I kept seeing repeatedly at all these different events. You know, you go once and then you go twice and then you go 3 times and you see the same people, so you end up just discussing and kind of building on these conversations. Whereas now it is very digital, and I think like you were saying, like community networks are really, really important. I've been involved in quite a few recently. Like there's one that I'm doing at the moment, which is run by Valeria, and it's called Womanhood, and it's kind of this dialogical project and socially engaged practice based on your period, and kind of having discussions with menstruals and secondary parties about basically everything to do with menstruality. And it's really, really interesting community where we just go onto Zoom and we have these discussions while creating artwork. And there's no pressure, but that is a really interesting one, and I'm sure we can put the link in the chat. Yeah, and as well, I'm on like a few Facebook groups like West End Creatives. That one's really great to see what people are up to. So yeah. And
how about yourself, Jenny? Do you have kind of any platforms perhaps that we can access digitally that kind of would help give creatives some ground to get started?
I guess it's very easy for me to feel that most of myself, where I see like art and people's work at the moment, is just by being on like too many mailing lists, which I think is like really valuable as well, just to be able to see what's going on everywhere. I think, well, there's one that I'm really interested in being in that I went to. There was a really great online conference a little bit ago, which I think was by the Feminist Association's Neurodiversity Reading Group. And that was, yeah, just a conference on feminist neurodiversity. So I guess that's more like a bit of a niche, but I'd be really interested to get involved in there. So I think there's all sorts of like reading groups and things like that. And I think a lot of them are more like discussion groups and particularly like reading groups. And I know there was a socially engaged practice, like a sort of monthly Zoom thing, but I'm not sure if it's been going on. I think that might have been from primary. I can't remember where it was from, but yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I suppose I'd add on to that answer. I have a question, Capture, about I suppose how do you find the people? It can be as simple as a conversation sometimes, and just letting people know what you're doing, what you want to do, and almost in the same way that me and Charlie met. It's just, I suppose, sometimes going for it and sending that email to cold calling someone. Sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it goes amazing.
Never underestimate the power of a single email.
And also, in addition to that, Katya, start with your own people that you know, and grow the context, and then invite their people, and it grows out. That's how Valeria's projects kind of grew.
I see there's also a question from Andrew in the chat as well, which is addressing this idea of holistic practice, this idea of being artist, curator, and everything else, and whatever fits into that kind of role. And I think he's asking here, where does it start? Do you see yourself as curators first, and then that feeding into artworks, or do you see yourself as kind of musicians first, and then that feeds into the curation? So I suppose, where does the process start?
I think for me, the process probably started as an artist, but it was more as an artist in the social ideas. Like, I was frustrated with the fact that we weren't given enough opportunities, and we kind of were missing out on a chance to connect with other courses. And that's what kind of my frustration is, what kind of led me to being a curator, because it was this coming together of people that ended up boosting this idea and kind of got me into that role. So in terms of the question, I think, like you said, like, are the ideas distinct? I don't think they are. I think they really feed into each other, because there's certain points that I take from my curative practice, which I kind of think I'd really like to introduce that into my artwork, and the way that people might engage with my own work and vice versa. So I think they are just kind of like in this circle, and they're kind of balancing each other out at the same time, if that makes any sense.
Do you feel the same, Jenny? Is it this kind of constantly evolving circle where everything feeds off each other?
Yeah, I think it's in some sense. I think also I probably need to take more of Amber's advice about not beating yourself up for not doing enough of different creative things, because I definitely do a lot of that. Because although like I really do enjoy this job, I think it also, like, I guess in terms of my sort of creative identity, is like sort of my job. And there are a lot of more things I'd like to do more of, like like creative things. But I think I don't know, I guess it's the sort of thing I don't try to think about too much. So like, well, this is what I'm doing now, and I'll do it as well as I can, and then maybe in the future it'll turn into more of a like creative practice thing. Just trying to be chill about it. I don't know.
Fantastic. There's another question that's just popped in from Zara, and they're asking, how do you seek out work from different mediums? So I think the question is kind of asking, where do you gravitate to? Where's searching? How do you find new artists? How do you find new work? What is your technique, I suppose, of engaging with the arts, especially at the moment? I suppose it's quite hard to you have kind of like a tried and tested technique, or certain maybe people that you follow is an artist that you're particularly interested in, or Instagram accounts that are particularly useful?
I think it is just that, like, I think when people kind of see these roles that we have in our practices, you probably think like, oh my God, they've tested everything out. They know exactly what they're doing, and they kind of like, they know where to find everyone, and they get the best people. But honestly, I could be sitting in front of the TV and scrolling on Instagram, and it's as simple as just me being a human being and doing what human beings do. And I'll be scrolling through, and that will kind of take me down a rabbit hole to somebody else that I find interesting, and it goes from there. I'll give them a follow. I might send them a message, be like, can you explain a little bit more about this practice? And it's just as simple as those things. You know, I might be eating dinner and I'm like looking through my phone, and it's as simple as that. Inspiration kind of comes when and wherever, and it kind of just hits, and it's just taking the initiative to like see what it is you like and remember it, take a picture of it, and kind of explore it further. So yeah, I suppose don't think that it's this crazy tested method because we are all just human, and I think we just do what humans do, and that's where the inspiration for me kind of comes at its easiest. So yeah.
And how about yourself, Jenny? Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think I'm quite similar, really, just like a lot of mailing list scrolling, but I think like I said at the beginning as well, I think with running open calls and stuff, that is something that I find really useful, because although like it might seem like only like 5 people will get in, but I've still seen every single submission, and that's still probably a name that I'd recognise, and a style that I might like recognise. And I do try and keep a big Word document of just like anything that's vaguely interesting, and it's very disorganised, but it's all but, and there's a lot of things that aren't there. So yeah, I think it's just like sort of, I don't know, just looking for things and then try and keep in track of what seems interesting. Yeah.
Active looking seems to be kind of what you're both describing, this idea of noticing what you're kind of interested in and you're enjoying, and then kind of keeping a track of it and following it, however that might be, if it is literally going or being able to go to a show, or it's keeping a Word document of a list of inspiration, so when you don't know where to go, you can open it up and look and be like, yes, I want to go see I want to go check out what A's doing, or I want to go check out what C's doing.
Absolutely. I think there's like certain times as well where, like, if it doesn't suit one project, you might start another project and it's literally the most perfect thing. So like, Jenny, I think that way of working sounds fantastic. I might start a Word document on myself.
Fantastic. It has been really lovely to talk to you both and delve into this kind of hidden world of curation that I felt like I've never really been able to ask questions about or hear about, or it's been really, really useful to learn. So thank you very much, and it's been a fantastic conversation, and it's been lovely.
Thank you all. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for having us.